Welcome back to Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and today we're examining something that might challenge how you think about the role animals play in human development. We tend to view childhood pet relationships as sweet, but ultimately temporary phases, adult pet ownership as lifestyle choices, and elderly people's attachment to animals as perhaps touching but not particularly significant. The research tells a different story entirely. What we're discovering is that our psychological relationship with animals follows predictable developmental patterns, serving distinct but equally important functions at different life stages. These aren't just nice to have relationships, they're meeting fundamental human needs that shift as we grow and age. Understanding these patterns might change how we support children, adults, and elderly people in our lives. I've been thinking about my own grandmother, who in her 80s developed what seemed like an unusually intense bond with her small dog. Family members sometimes worried she was becoming too dependent, too focused on this animal. Looking at the research now, I realize we might have been missing something crucial about what that relationship was providing for her psychological and physical well being. Let's start with childhood, where the research reveals some particularly striking findings about how animals contribute to emotional and social development. Children's relationships with animals serve as what developmental psychologists call scaffolding, supportive structures that enable growth in areas that might otherwise be challenging. But here's what's interesting: it's not just about having a pet present. The quality and nature of the child's engagement with the animal determines whether these developmental benefits actually occur. Children who have strong attachments to their pets, who are actively involved in care, who feel genuine emotional connection, show measurably higher levels of empathy compared to children without pets or those with weaker animal bonds. This isn't a small effect. We're talking about fundamental differences in how children understand and respond to the emotional needs of others. But let's think about why this might be happening. Caring for an animal requires children to practice perspective taking in a relatively safe context. The dog can't verbally express what it needs, so the child must learn to read nonverbal cues, to anticipate needs, to provide comfort without expecting articulated gratitude. These are precisely the skills that transfer to human relationships, but they might be easier to develop first with an animal who won't judge clumsy early attempts at empathy. The research also shows that children with strong pet bonds report less loneliness and fewer peer problems. Their pets serve as confidants, sources of unconditional acceptance during a developmental period when peer relationships can be unpredictable and sometimes cruel. This isn't about animals replacing human relationships. It's about providing emotional stability that enables children to take the risks necessary for human social development. What's particularly noteworthy is how animals serve as what researchers call transitional objects for children. But unlike a stuffed animal or blanket, pets provide interactive comfort. They respond, they seek comfort in return, they create genuine reciprocal relationships. This reciprocity seems crucial for developing what psychologists call prosocial orientation, the tendency to care about and help others. Children also use animal relationships to practice emotional expression and regulation. The research shows that children with pets demonstrate better emotional expression skills and are more comfortable identifying and communicating their feelings. Again, this makes intuitive sense. Pets provide a safe audience for emotional expression, someone who won't judge or minimize a child's feelings. For children who struggle with peer relationships or who experience social anxiety, pets can serve as social catalysts. Having a pet provides conversation starters, shared interests with other children, and opportunities to practice social skills in less threatening contexts. The child walking a dog naturally encounters other children and adults, creating low pressure social interactions. There's also emerging research on children with autism that suggests animal relationships can be particularly beneficial for developing social skills and emotional well being. The predictable, non judgmental nature of animal interactions might provide ideal conditions for practicing social behaviors that feel overwhelming in human contexts. But here's something important that the research reveals: these benefits aren't automatic. Simply having a pet in the household doesn't guarantee positive outcomes. Children who are actively engaged in pet care, who develop genuine emotional bonds, who participate in activities like walking or playing with the animal, these are the children who show the strongest developmental benefits. This active engagement requirement suggests something important about how these relationships work. It's not passive exposure to an animal that matters. It's the responsibility, the reciprocity, the daily practice of caring for another being's needs while having your own emotional needs met in return. As we move into adulthood, the psychological functions of animal relationships become more complex and, in some ways, more critical for mental health during stressful life periods. Adult attachment to animals often serves as what researchers call stress buffering, providing emotional regulation and stability during periods when life feels overwhelming or unpredictable. Unlike childhood, where animal relationships support the development of new skills, adult animal relationships more often support the maintenance of emotional equilibrium during challenging circumstances. The research reveals that adults with higher attachment anxiety, those who worry about being rejected or abandoned in human relationships, often develop particularly strong bonds with their pets. This can be adaptive, providing the emotional security that enables them to take risks in human relationships, or it can become problematic if the animal relationship substitutes for, rather than supplements, human connection. Some adults experience genuine separation anxiety related to their pets, similar to what we see in human attachment relationships. This reflects the real importance of these relationships for daily emotional regulation. The pet provides predictable comfort, unconditional acceptance, and emotional stability that might be harder to access in human relationships, which can be complicated by their own stresses and needs. The health benefits of animal companionship become particularly pronounced in adulthood. We see measurable improvements in cardiovascular health, stress hormone levels, and overall mental health outcomes. But these benefits depend heavily on the quality of the relationship and how well it meets the individual's specific emotional needs. For adults navigating major life transitions, career changes, relationship difficulties, parenthood, caring for aging parents, animal relationships can provide crucial continuity. Unlike human relationships, which might be disrupted by the same stresses affecting the individual, pets provide consistent, uncomplicated companionship. But adult animal relationships also involve complexities that don't exist in childhood. Adults must balance their animals' needs with other responsibilities, make difficult decisions about veterinary care and end of life choices, and navigate how animal relationships fit with human partnerships and family obligations. The research suggests that healthy adult animal relationships enhance rather than replace human connections, providing the emotional regulation and stability that enables better human relationships. Problematic adult animal relationships, on the other hand, might signal underlying difficulties with human attachment or serve as avoidance of the vulnerabilities required for human intimacy. When we reach older adulthood, animal relationships take on yet another set of functions, often becoming central to maintaining quality of life and psychological well being during a period when many other sources of meaning and connection might be diminishing. For older adults, companion animals serve multiple interconnected functions that address some of the primary psychological and physical challenges of aging. The most obvious is combating loneliness. As social networks shrink due to retirement, loss of friends and family, or mobility limitations, pets provide consistent companionship and emotional connection. But it's not just about having company, it's about having a relationship that provides emotional reciprocity without the complex social navigation that human relationships increasingly require, as cognitive or physical abilities change. The pet doesn't judge changes in appearance, memory, or physical functioning. It continues to provide and seek affection, regardless of these age related changes. Research consistently shows that older adults with companion animals report lower levels of depression, anxiety, and behavioral symptoms associated with dementia. They show better emotional regulation and, in many studies, higher life satisfaction and sense of purpose. The physical benefits are particularly striking for older adults. Dog ownership, especially, is associated with increased physical activity, better cardiovascular health, lower body mass index, and fewer limitations in daily activities. This isn't just correlation. The dog's needs create external motivation for physical activity that might otherwise decline. More subtly, pets provide structure and routine during a life stage when other sources of daily organization might be disappearing. Feeding times, walks, grooming, these create a framework for the day that can be crucial for mental health, especially for older adults who may feel their usefulness or purpose has diminished. Animals also serve as social catalysts for older adults, creating opportunities for casual social interactions that might otherwise be lacking. Walking a dog naturally leads to conversations with neighbors. Having a pet provides common ground for connecting with others. Perhaps most importantly, pets can provide motivation for self care during periods when an older adult might otherwise neglect their own needs. The animal's dependence creates a sense of responsibility and purpose that extends beyond the relationship itself, but the research also reveals important challenges and limitations. Not all older adults benefit from pet ownership, and the responsibilities can become burdensome for those with significant physical limitations or financial constraints. The grief associated with pet loss can be particularly devastating for older adults, sometimes mirroring the intensity of losing a human loved one. There's also what researchers call the pet dependency paradox. While animals can support independence and quality of life, they can also create dependencies that limit housing options, travel possibilities, or care arrangements if health declines. What's particularly striking about the research across all life stages is how consistently it points to the quality of the relationship, rather than simple pet ownership, as the determining factor for positive outcomes. This suggests that these aren't casual lifestyle choices, but genuine attachment relationships that meet fundamental human needs for connection, care, and emotional regulation. The developmental progression is also noteworthy. In childhood, animal relationships support the development of empathy and social skills. In adulthood, they support emotional regulation and stress management during complex life challenges. In older adulthood, they support continued engagement with life and maintenance of physical and mental well being. But there are also consistent themes across all ages. The non judgmental nature of animal relationships appears valuable throughout the lifespan, though for different reasons at different stages. The reciprocal nature of care, both giving and receiving, seems important at every age. The predictability and reliability of animal relationships provide stability during all types of life transitions and challenges. Understanding these developmental patterns has several important implications for how we support people across the lifespan. First, we need to recognize that animal relationships can serve legitimate therapeutic functions at every age, but the specific benefits and potential problems will vary depending on the life stage and individual circumstances. A child's intense bond with a pet might be serving crucial developmental functions. An adult's strong attachment to an animal might be providing necessary emotional regulation. An older adult's concern about their pet might reflect the genuine importance of that relationship for their daily well being. Second, we need to consider how to support these relationships appropriately at different life stages. For children, this might mean involving them in age appropriate pet care and helping them process the grief that comes with shorter animal lifespans. For adults, it might mean recognizing pet relationships as legitimate sources of support while ensuring they complement rather than replace human connections. For older adults, it might mean addressing practical barriers to pet ownership and providing support when physical or financial limitations arise. Third, we need to prepare people for the grief that inevitably accompanies animal relationships and recognize that this grief might be particularly intense when the animal has served crucial psychological functions. A child losing their first pet is learning about loss and developing coping skills for future grief. An adult losing a pet that helped them through a divorce or job loss is losing a significant source of emotional support. An older adult losing a pet might be losing their primary daily companion and source of purpose. The research also raises some important questions about how we structure society to support these relationships. How do we ensure that children who could benefit from animal relationships have access to them? How do we address housing policies that might prevent beneficial pet ownership? How do we support older adults who want to maintain animal relationships despite physical or financial limitations? There's something profound in recognizing that our capacity for interspecies bonding serves different but consistently important functions throughout our development. These relationships remind us that our fundamental needs for connection, care, and emotional regulation don't disappear as we age. They simply evolve. The child learning empathy through pet care, the adult finding stress relief through animal companionship, and the older adult maintaining daily structure and purpose through pet ownership are all accessing the same fundamental human capacity for attachment, just directed toward meeting age appropriate developmental needs. What strikes me most about this research is how it challenges us to take all forms of significant relationships seriously, regardless of whether they conform to traditional expectations about which connections should matter most at different life stages. The 8-year-old who talks to their hamster about friendship problems, the 40-year-old who credits their dog with helping them through a difficult divorce, and the 75-year-old whose cat provides their primary daily motivation for self care are all accessing profound sources of healing and growth that deserve recognition and support. These relationships also offer insights into what humans need from relationships more generally: predictability, acceptance, opportunities for both giving and receiving care, and connections that provide emotional regulation without excessive complexity or judgment. As we think about supporting people through various life challenges and transitions, we might consider how to incorporate some of these qualities into human relationships and therapeutic interventions. What would it look like to offer the kind of consistent, non judgmental presence that animals provide? How might we create opportunities for reciprocal care that don't overwhelm people with complex social dynamics? Understanding the lifespan development of human animal bonds also reminds us that growth and healing happen in relationship throughout our lives. We don't outgrow our need for connection, comfort, and care. We simply need these things expressed in ways that match our developmental stage and life circumstances. The research suggests that animal relationships can serve as bridges during transitions, scaffolding during skill development, and anchors during periods of instability. They offer something uniquely valuable: relationships that grow with us emotionally, even when they can't grow with us chronologically. This has been Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and thank you for joining me today.